everyone. Welcome to healingals.org Sunday Community Meetings. I'm Scott Douglas, hosting along with Patricia Tomowski. This is a fantastic platform where we can talk about ALS. And thank you all for being here. This is fantastic. It's important to note that Tish and I are not medical professionals. We're not here trying to give you medical advice, but we have a variety of medical professionals that join us and help present with presentations that are able to give you a variety of perspective on ALS. It's important that we focus on our personal journey, because so many different modalities and protocols and different ways that others have healed and reversed their symptoms. It's important that you find your journey of reversing your ALS symptoms on your personal level. And at the same time, share the journeys of others who have not only stopped the progression of this disease, but have reversed this disease and gaining in functionality and keep joy in your life, because staying positive is very important. And that helps you all the way down to the mitochondrial level. And you don't want to be in that parasympathetic mode where you're in defense mode, fight or flight, because even at that cellular level, you accept less nutrients when you're in that defense mode. But when you're open to joy, love, kindness, prayer, meditation, you open up those cells that accept nutrients much better, okay? As you detox, that is important to be in a relaxing mode as you detox, okay? It's very important. So do your own research, make sure things resonate with you. Things that don't resonate with you and don't function well with you, you have to let your medical professionals know that I've seen this, I found this resonates with me, I'm feeling better going this route instead of that route, because you are the president of your own healing. You are in charge. Everyone else, they're your advisors around you. You become the center of your healing, and please take control of your health. Okay, we're gonna get right to it right here. Enjoy yourself, have fun as you do, and day to day, it's important. Prayer, meditation, spend time for yourself. And every challenge, as Dr. Joyce Brown just said, it is a growing challenge. It's a challenge in your life. We grow from all of it. And so continue to move on. And Tish.
Okay, so a few things, just generally want to thank our donors. There's no way we could do this without our donors. So we just really truly appreciate all of you. And our volunteers. So this is I think coming up is the third Tuesday of the month. Yeah, so there is a volunteer meeting this Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Just to let you know, if you just want to find out more, new volunteers are welcome. So feel free to come and join us. And third Tuesday of the month, by the way, is also the feeding tube. So go to healingals.org events, and you'll also get it in your email. But feeding tube is this Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So right after the volunteer meeting is the monthly feeding tube Q&A. So you definitely want to go to that one. Okay. This is really important. If you are not doing the 47 steps to healing, you need to be doing it. So everyone is here. If you're not coming to the 47 steps, please come. There is a ton of information. If you want to heal, if you're serious about healing, you've got to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And if you're not doing these 47 steps, so you want to come in where you are. You can catch up later, but I would absolutely jump in, those of you who are not participating. We meet every Thursday. There's 2 times. There's 8 a.m. Eastern time and 7 p.m. Eastern time. So we get the whole world from Australia to Asia to California. And everyone is open to everyone, and it is free. So okay, if you're not receiving our emails, please healingals@gmail.com and we will figure it out. Do check your spam, however, first. And also, it's the middle of the month. So if you have not done your registry at alsregistry.org, please do your monthly registry. If you can get it all done, and then if you want to make a few tweaks on the 30th or the 29th or the 28th or the 27th, don't wait till the last few days to do it. Go ahead and do it now. It's really important that we track everyone who's doing functional approaches to ALS. You guys, we can make history with your assistance. So this is real, this registry, alsregistry.org, is super important. Okay. I think everything else was good. This is a big, huge deal, by the way. We lost Jonathan Kinnersley at the end of March, and I think he was either 18 or 19. I don't remember exactly what his date was. He left behind 2 daughters and a wife. And what I really liked, his daughter posted in his Facebook group, "My father was the greatest man I ever met and the greatest father I could have asked to have. Supremely smart, fine, funny, and taught me how to appreciate the little joys in life." And these were just some of his hobbies. And she said he was good at everything he did. The biggest way we got to know him is in, I think it was 2020, we started doing the registry. We started working on the registry in the fall of 2020, and he joined a volunteer meeting and said, "I can code, I can do this." And so, and he volunteered. I don't know if this 2020. Yeah. Anyway, so he created the prototype of the registry. Actually, it wasn't 2020. It was 2021 when he joined us. He had his PhD in astrophysics. He worked as a software. He did a lot of really interesting stuff in the technical field. But he actually wrote the prototype. But this was a huge team effort, going all the way from like Brian Mogensen and Aidan Arpa and Marcel Didin, and then we kind of created it and we designed it, and Jonathan wrote it. So again, and now Zach is working on it, but it's a huge deal. People are always asking, why would someone pass away that quickly? I can tell you why. In March of 2022, when Heather did her mold presentation, his mold count was very, very high in his home. And we've learned since then. So this is things we didn't know back then, but we know now. It's like smoking a couple of packs, depending on how much, you could be smoking 2 or 3 packs of cigarettes a day and trying to heal from a disease. So you're basically taking in toxins every single day. And they did mold remediation. I think now today, they knew about the high-tech machines, but weren't like totally convinced of them. Now, I think we've done enough testing with enough different machines that, and maybe he would have passed away anyway. We really don't know. But with those levels of mold and not taking care of it, I really think getting those mold counts all the way down to 0. And again, the part of the reason we do this is that we're trying to find more answers. And I believe our reversal rate, our heal rate, our long-term survivor rate is going to be way, way higher than it's ever been. But I just wanted to honor Jonathan today. He's just, what a cool guy, let me tell you. It's a lot of fun, and we're going to miss him. And he really, really major contribution for healing ALS and for our ALS community worldwide. So, okay, we are now going to get to Coco Newton, gaining and maintaining weight in ALS. So, by the way, this is a picture before she gets started. This is a picture of Craig Oster, who was her very, very, very first patient. And, he was almost dead in hospice in 2009. And she helped bring him back. And he lived 27 years with ALS. And I'll let Coco talk about that a little bit more, but I want to introduce Coco while I'm here before we switch screens. Coco. Coco we're so honored to have her. She has been a functional medical nutritionist for, 30 or 40 years, a long, long time. And now she is really devoted to helping pals throughout the world. She is the facilitator of our Healing ALS clinicians group. She sends out the reminders every week. She gets the speakers. She vets them. A huge, huge contribution. Thank you so much, Coco. And if you look at all her degrees and things, she's like super, super qualified. So I won't even go into that. But a couple of highlights. She was on the IFM Nutritional Advisory Board from 2007 to 2010. She also served in the State Michigan Board of Dietetics and Nutrition. She has been really just a mover and a shaker as far as getting functional nutrition in place in the dietetics, dietitian nutrition world. She also has presented on a variety of talks and written a variety of papers. One of her big things that she's done is she's co-authored the ALS, the chapter in ALS of this textbook that's used in functional nutrition medical schools called The Application of Integrative and Functional Medicine Nutritional Therapy by Springer. She has rewarded, you can't even see it, but she's gotten the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Institute and also the Visionary Award from the dietitian and DIFM. So we just are so honored to have Coco here. Coco, thank you so much for coming. And we're all learning. And what's really cool is that these the functional doctors, and I noticed Dr. Cowden's on today and as well. And these guys are in the background really doing cutting edge of what is the very best for ALS. So you're going to learn a lot today. There will be a part 2 in this in May, but this is all cutting edge as far as and there's no one answer. There's a whole bunch of answers, but Coco, go ahead and you can start. I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming, and thank you for presenting today.
Well, I just want to say hi to everybody, those that I've met before, either in person or here in the webinars, and then to the new people that are joining. I met Scott and Tish I think it was 2014 or 15 or around there. And so I really appreciate all that they've done to help me help pals. When I started, I didn't have any peers, and now I do. And it's wonderful. So we're going to start today. So this isn't just about gaining weight, but the title would have been way too long if I had told you everything that would be in today's discussion. So we are going to talk about body weight and hydration, how the gut interfaces with this, metabolism and hypermetabolism, and intermittent fasting, a little bit on keto, and appetite and hunger. So there's so many things that go into body weight, and body weight is this almost like this thermometer of worry, stress, success, failure that people are often monitoring things by. And we get very, very concerned when weight is lost, and we get happy when weight is gained. But it's not all just weight, it's the quality of weight that I want to talk about today, and different approaches to that. I always like to start by reminding you about the brain, that it only comprises 2% of the total body weight, yet it takes up about 20% of all the blood circulation, all the flow. And it uses about 20% of the body's energy. So the brain is a tiny little powerhouse. So in ALS, there is a whole body energy imbalance. And the energy you take in through food is counterbalanced by your metabolism going up most of the time, activity, and then just having ALS. So there's usually a negative energy balance that we're chasing after. And Tish, I just want to ask you, can I minimize? Oh, yes, I can. Okay, good. Okay. So in ALS, your resting energy expenditure, which is the amount of calories you're burning per day, is up about 10 to 30% over the average person. And that's the case in about 50% of PALs. And the estimated amount of calories that a PALS needs is about 35 to 40 calories per kilogram, and about 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram. So you can calculate that for yourself. You might want to calculate it based on your current weight or your ideal weight and see what it is you would need to maintain or to gain. And I don't know quantitatively, but fasciculations do increase calorie burning. And when we look at the prognosis of ALS, loss of muscle is far more prognostic than body mass index, because even though you hear a lot about body mass index, it does not include the muscle in the equation. And one thing we do know is that no matter how much protein you take in, it won't be sufficient unless there's enough calories. So you do need enough calories to prevent muscle loss. You can't just eat protein to prevent muscle loss. I'm trying to advance it, but hey, Tish. I can't advance the slide.
Being able to just click it.
Put your cursor in the middle of the screen and then click it.
There we go. Thank you, Lee Cowden, Dr. Lee Cowden. Thank you. And so there's this fancy equation. You can try it if you want. I haven't found it overly helpful compared to the quick one that I just gave you, but I think it's worth running through once. And this is a customized equation for ALS. So it uses this equation for men and for women, and it factors in the ALS FRS 6 score. And all you have to do is add up the sum of the questions 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 10 to get to that score. That's another option. One thing we do know is that there is a shift when there's total invasive ventilation, and that the hypermetabolism that exists pre-ventilation starts to shift into hypometabolism post-ventilation. So you'll often see an increase in body mass index, but that increase in body mass index is largely reflecting fat, not muscle. So, you'll see an increase in weight, but it's mostly going to be fat. And weight gain does not confer disease stability. But we do know that fat mass loss correlates with faster disease progression. So lots of times you'll see when someone is ventilated and they're on a feeding tube, you might see weight gain, but most of it is going to be in fat, unless that person is doing exercise. Like my patient that Tish just referred to, he did go on ventilation and tube feeding when he was hospitalized for COVID. And after that, he started exercising several hours a day on his recumbent bike. And he gained a lot of muscle along with gaining weight, about 30 to 35 pounds. And he looked great. So let's look at the compartment changes in ALS, because what's happening is weight is made up of all these compartments, and you can't just look at weight as a superficial number to gauge health or progressing illness. So one of the issues in ALS is total body water goes down. And I'll explain in a minute how extracellular fluids go up. And one of the issues with extracellular fluids when they're disproportionate to the intracellular fluids, and that's outside of the cell and inside of the cell, is that that's often an issue with inflammation. And so also muscle goes down in ALS, both skeletal muscle and visceral muscle, which is the muscle around your organs. Bone density goes down. There's such a thing as disuse osteoporosis, which can be a risk factor in ALS. So we do need to pay attention to that. And I think that that's where people have a lot of questions around exercise and should you exercise or not with ALS. And I think resistance exercise that can help build the bones is very, very important. Overly exercising could be an issue, getting out of breath, but there's also a risk genotype for exercise that Some pals might be more at risk for exercise problems. And but I can talk about that later. I don't want to go into the genetics, but there is a risk genotype. Another thing that happens, there's an increase in visceral fat, and that's fat, especially abdominal fat. And there's a decrease in subcutaneous fat under your skin, and that is often a reflection of muscle loss, lack of innervation, lack of use, and malnutrition. I want to talk about hydration because I think that often gets overlooked. And when I've spoken with a lot of pals, there's this problem with not wanting to use the bathroom too often, because especially when the pals is needing assistance, there's this, I don't want to bother the person who's taking care of me. So there is a conscious or subconscious restriction of fluids that a lot of pals go through, that, you know, maybe thinking I'm just drinking enough to get by, so I'm not too thirsty, but not enough for health. And hydration might be more important a predictor of survival than malnutrition. So there is a validated equation that ALS clinics can use to determine your hydration status. I don't know that equation, but I think that next time you do see your ALS clinic, your doctor at your ALS clinic, find out if they can use a validated equation that's customized for ALS patients. You know, there's kind of a general recommendation of men and women, 3 liters and 2.5 liters, but that's very, very cursory because you're not even looking at body weight with that. So that's something that has to be figured out individually. So one of the issues with fluid compartments, so if we're about 60 to 70% water, about 1/3 of it is going to be extracellular fluid, and that's fluid in your blood, your plasma, that's in between the cells, that's your lymph, your GI fluids, your spinal column fluids, etc. But there is an issue in the extracellular fluid world for ALS that we really have to pay attention, and that is ALS can make you prone to dependent edema. And that's when, you know, your veins depend on muscle movement to keep moving the blood and fluid back to the heart. And if the muscles aren't working, fluid can seep out into the surrounding tissues. So I think that when we talk about weight, again, because you could hold on to 5 or more pounds of water weight and be thinking you're gaining weight, but not in the right places. So this extracellular fluid, like I mentioned just before, it does cause health problems with heart, kidneys, liver, inflammation, edema. And if you don't have enough intracellular fluid, that's this fluid inside your cells, then your mitochondria aren't as powerfully able to make ATP. So this balance of fluid is really important. And this might be something that Diana and I talk about again when we do part 2 of this, on how to, you know, help these fluids get into the right compartments and understand better how to measure it. So I just want to tell you that good hydration status, it may sound basic, but here are all the different variables that are improved with good hydration status. And you can see why this could be an independent risk factor for ALS, because all of this is going on with water. And so if you're going to support your cellular repair, if you're going to have energy, if you're going to clear out toxins and metabolic waste, if you're going to have a more balanced body composition, if you're going to balance your blood sugar, you know, hydrate your lungs so you can get rid of carbon dioxide, increase your blood flow so oxygen can get to the tissues that they need. Water even helps support the formation of hydrochloric acid, which is so important for digestion and can help when this is done to reduce heartburn. So I think that we really need to pay attention to our water. Now, in one of the 47 steps, water is discussed as far as how to make sure your water is the right kind of water, that it is properly filtered, has the right electrolytes in it, and so forth. So it's not just any water. Okay. So how can you look at your own hydration? Well, take a look at your urinalysis and see what your urine specific gravity value is. It's on every urinalysis, so you can look at that. And you want to be in the well hydrated stage. So please look at that. And then if you wanted to do it at home, you can buy at various online, easy to buy strips so that you can look at your urine specific gravity. I don't know how accurate that is compared to the laboratory test. So I would do it at the same time if I were you, to see what the difference is in your measurements. And you've seen this before, you've seen it in the registry or something very much like it, but you can also gauge your hydration by seeing what color your urine is. And so you want to be in that pale straw color for being well hydrated, ideally. And so the best way to drink water is to sip it throughout the day. That way your cells have a chance to take it in and get inside the cell. If you let yourself get dehydrated and then think, oh, I'll just drink a couple cups in the next, 15 minutes, the water is going to spill out. It's not going to get absorbed by your cells. So I really think the best thing is to sip it throughout the day. And that actually helps reduce urgency of urination when you do it that way. So obviously we want to heal our gut. We want to fix our gut to optimize our ability to digest food, absorb food, and assimilate all the nutrients and the calories that are in the food. So if you are dealing, like many pals, gastrointestinal issues precede ALS in quite a few cases, and more commonly than not. So if you're dealing with diarrhea or any kind of inflammatory bowel disease or reflux disease, gastritis, peptic ulcers, celiac, you're not going to be absorbing your nutrients no matter what you're eating. They're not going to get to where they need to be. So, and then on a laboratory level, if you ever measure pancreatic elastin, which if you can't get a functional test done, one of the fancier GI tests, then you can still ask your doctor to order pancreatic elastin to let you know if your pancreas is making digestive enzymes at a proper level. And you can look at fat in the stool. Sometimes you can see it yourself. You look in the toilet and you might go, oh, that looks a little greasy or oily. That would be an indication. But you can also do a stool test that looks at fat in the stool. And so that might tell you that your gallbladder is weak and you're not, don't have enough bile salt secretion, or that you have pancreatic enzyme deficiency for digestive enzymes. And if you have leaky gut, there can be many causes of leaky gut, but if you have both leaky gut, inflammation, malabsorption, poor digestion, and any kind of inflammatory bowel disease, we know that that's going to affect your ability to gain weight. So at the most basic level, this is metabolism. And I know that, many of you know this, but sometimes the word metabolism gets thrown around and it's like, well, what is it exactly? People might wonder. And basically at the most basic level, it's the food you eat, which is made up of these macronutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats that are being used as fuel for your cells. But those carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, they have to be digested, they have to be absorbed, can't be malabsorbed, and they have to be bioavailable, meaning that they have to be in a form that the body can use. And then that is what makes energy, ATP, and we're especially here concerned about the brain, the liver, and the muscle. So digestion increases your basal metabolic rate by differing amounts. And your basal metabolic rate is the rate you just existing doing nothing. It's no activity, it's no stress of disease, it's no nothing. It's just you breathing and being still. And when you eat food, you actually increase your metabolic rate. It actually costs you calories to eat food. So fat will increase your metabolic rate by 0 to 3%. And carbohydrate increases it by about 5 to 10%. And protein increases your metabolic rate 20 to 30%. And hot, spicy foods can have a significant thermic effect also. Now, that's not telling you to eat or not eat any of these foods, but when you are trying to gain weight, you want to eat efficient calories. And so I find it very illuminating to tell you that fat digestion uses the least amount of your caloric energy. Costs you the least, but it provides you the most amount of caloric energy. So I'm going to be talking later about, well, how much fat should you have in your diet? And we'll talk about keto and a little bit about intermittent fasting. But just keep that in mind, that you might think that fat would be the most expensive food to eat, but it's actually the most efficient food to eat. Now, you hear about hypermetabolism, and that PALS, about 50% of PALS at least, are hypermetabolic. And I have spent a lot of time researching and trying to understand hypermetabolism. And those equations that I gave you in the very beginning about how many calories per kilogram does a PALS need are based on assuming hypermetabolism, but not all PALS are hypermetabolic. And that's why I have found out through my patients, who, by the way, are my best teachers. What would I do? I mean, I learned through you. Whoa, this person, they're not losing weight on this level of calories. And I would think that they would be, or this person is not gaining enough weight on this level of calories, and I am thinking they should. So it's caused me to kind of go back and really figure out, how do I figure this out for the individual? So let me just tell you, when you have hypermetabolism, it shouts out that there's defective mitochondrial function in the liver, the muscle, and the spinal motor neurons. But it's really a protective effect. It's a defensive mechanism. It happens when the body is trying to combat illness or disease in order to heal itself. Think of burn patients. Burn patients are super hypercatabolic, super hypermetabolism, way more than ALS. And the body does that in order to heal itself. So when the body is breaking down carbohydrates and proteins and fats to meet your metabolic needs, proteins are the ones that we are going to be especially concerned about, because that's speaking to not only our skeletal muscle, but also the muscle of our organs. We need enough protein to, run our heart, our lungs, and our other organs that depend on muscle. We know that hypermetabolism is associated with a faster rate of functional decline and a shorter survival. We know that it's associated with inflammation. And what is interesting is that high HDL and low HDL is seen a lot among PALS with hypermetabolism, and actually predicts a shorter survival. And hypermetabolism is higher in PALS with more extensive lower motor neuron involvement. But there's some paradox here. All right. So you know, like if the average person starts starving, you know, or someone with anorexia starts starving themselves, the body lowers its metabolic rate because it's trying to offset the starvation. It's a natural defensive mechanism. That defensive mechanism of a lowered metabolic rate is lost during weight loss and starvation in PALS. So it's a very different dynamic. Now, along with weight loss and hypermetabolic state, PALS experience a decrease in appetite and a false sense of satiety or satisfaction, like I'm fed, I've had enough to eat, when in fact, that's not the case. Okay, so that's one of the two of the paradoxes. The other thing is studying PALS with and without hypermetabolism, certain things stay the same, like weight and BMI and fat mass was similar between PALS with normal and hypermetabolism. Now that is a totally counterintuitive fact. And I think, why would weight stay the same? Why would fat mass stay the same? Why would BMI stay the same in normal and hypermetabolic states? I don't know, but there is no study that currently proves that hypermetabolism causes more weight loss in PALS. So maybe it's just not being measured properly. Maybe there's something missing here, but there's another very counterintuitive piece of information. Now, the site of your disease onset does not differ between PALS with normal or hypermetabolism, and hypometabolism occurs in the brain with low glucose utilization. So there's parts of the body that will be hypometabolic and parts of the body that will be hypermetabolic. So that's just part of the paradox. Now, I'm not going to go into all of this, but I want to let you know that ALS glucose metabolism is very dysfunctional. And so on the left, it's non-diseased. On the right, this is an ALS situation. And there is a difference in how glucose is transported in the body, how the pathways that it goes through, the enzymes that are needed to feed the glucose into the next level on its journey through the enzymatic pathways. They're very dysregulated. And so that is very important because this glucose is trying to make energy and it's trying to bring it down to the level of the cell, but it's not efficient. And so it's actually can be very damaging to continue feeding the body with glucose or sugar when the body can't regulate it anyway. And I know that there's been some mouse studies, I think it was mouse studies on, how sugar can, work very well. But remember, those mice are only alive for a very short period of time. And when you're trying to compare a preclinical mouse study to a human study, it's very, very different. And we can't just make that leap. And there's so many other things that happen when we feed the body too much sugar that damage metabolism. For example, the creation of blood sugar and insulin resistance, feeding microbes such as mold. I mean, sugar goes on and on to be a very inflammatory food. But we are fortunate because fat metabolism and using fats in the diet, it can come to the rescue and can be preferred to glucose in the central nervous system and in the muscle. So the fats can provide the intermediates that are needed for metabolism, for nutrients going through the cell to make ATP. It helps convert glutamate to glutamine. It helps make more GABA. It helps mitochondrial function, and it decreases hypermetabolic stress. And I put here in an asterisk, except for omega-3. I know in looking at the literature, it's almost 50-50. Omega-3 is a problem. Omega-3 is a solution. And instead of taking it black and white like that. I would rather see, and Diana has talked about this, Diana Noland, another functional medicine nutritionist, has talked a lot about looking at the cell membrane and looking at erythrocyte fatty acid analysis to really see if that person needs more or less of any particular kind of fatty acid. And so rather than making a blanket statement, I think it's important to know the status of that person's cellular membrane health when it comes to fatty acids, to personalize the recommendation. So a lot has been discussed about intermittent fasting and the keto diet in neurodegenerative diseases, a little less so in the world of ALS. But before I go into that, that word diet is kind of a 4-letter word that it has a lot of people recoil because it has, it brings up restriction, and it brings up denying the body, what you think you want. But I just want to remind you that the origin of the word is a Greek word. It comes through Latin, but from Greece. Dieta, I may not be pronouncing it right, but it really means a way of life. And as you're changing your diet, and learning more and more about what works for you and coming to these meetings and, meeting new healthcare practitioners that value food and diet in neurodegeneration and ALS, then you make it a way of life instead of saying, I'm on the keto diet or I'm on this diet. I'm on a way of life, which includes eating. It includes how you interact with people. It includes the meditation and the music you listen to and all that you think about and create in your world. And I hope you can appreciate that what we're trying to do is bring diet from change it from a very restrictive and kind of almost like religious type of dictate to becoming a way of your life that supports your health, keeps you healthy. And so I hope that you can get that out of this too. So I wanted to give you some definitions of, what is fasting? What's intermittent fasting? You'll hear calorie restriction. You'll hear all sorts of terms. So fasting, there are stages of fasting. There's the fed state, 0 to 3 hours. Once you stop eating, and then it goes into 2, 3, 4. So you can see here that as the hours gain, there is going to be ketosis. So there's stages of fasting, and of course, it's not going to be the exact same for everybody, but this is the general schedule of stages. Fasting schedule. So people fast in different fashions. Some people are 12-hour fasts. Oh, I should have said 9-hour meals there. I didn't mean 12 hours of meals.
I think we want to let everyone know too that when you're fasting, you're still drinking water.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. You're staying plenty hydrated. Okay. And so, so that should say 12 hours fast and 9 hours of meals and not eating 3 hours before bedtime. So we'll correct that. And then you have like a 16 to 18-hour fast with a 6 to 8 hour time for meals. There's another one called the 5-2 diet, which is, you can see what it says here. And then you have the 24-hour fast, the 48-hour, the 72-hour fast. So these are all different styles of fasting. Okay, I'm trying to advance it. Let's see. There we go. So some of you might be familiar with Dr. Dale Bredesen, and this is just, this is not from a scientific study. This is just his opinion. Dr. Dale Bredesen is someone that Tish and Scott interviewed, and I've met him several times. A lot of us know him. He is very well known for his work in Alzheimer's disease, and he wrote the book on reversing Alzheimer's disease. And he just says, our findings suggest that one of the reasons that fasting is beneficial is that it gives the nervous system a break. It calms things down, because when you're fasting, you're not bringing in food, which requires energy to metabolize. You're just giving the body almost like some good silent treatment. And he also says that it's probably a good thing when nutrients are unavailable because an organism reduces neurotransmitter release and saves a good proportion of its overall energy expenditure. You know, I take that and I think it's like a person saying, and you all know this, I need my space, but it's really like giving the body space without a lot of stimulation. So here are some of the benefits of intermittent fasting. Okay, so at the brain, first of all, the benefits of intermittent fasting are systemic, but at the brain level and the muscle level, we'll focus on that right now, although all of this is very important. So it's enhancing the synapses' ability to perform properly, cognition, neurogenesis, reducing inflammation, and autophagy, so the ability of the body, the brain, to get rid of its metabolic waste. And at the muscle level, it's increasing insulin sensitivity, and it's enhancing autophagy again. And so there's so much here that is beneficial to the body, and not to mention that the creation of new stem cells can happen. And so there's a lot. So this is just in general, the benefits of intermittent fasting. But one of the questions that comes up a lot is, well, what happens to my muscle when I'm intermittent fasting? And there's two perspectives out there. I'm going to give you two perspectives, but I'm going to tell you which one I lean towards. Because sometimes I think it's really important that you know the different opinions on something, and not just a bias in one way. So I'll try to give that to you. We know that muscle is constantly turning over. You know, it breaks down, it's damaged, and then it's resynthesized. In this particular recent article, the opinion is that intermittent fasting might be counterproductive to optimizing protein turnover and muscle protein balance, and that it is unlikely to be a good approach for skeletal muscle quality and maintenance. On the other hand, there's a second perspective that protein loss occurs early in fasting, but decreases as ketogenesis increases after 12 hours. And when you add resistance training to an adequate or high protein diet, it appears to make muscle loss very unlikely. So here's a place where exercise can come in. And it's harder to build muscle during intermittent fasting, but you might be able to maintain it and not lose it. And there might be, in more people, less muscle loss with a fast that's under 24 hours. But that doesn't mean that somebody who fasts 48 or more hours is definitely going to lose muscle loss. This is just a perspective. I think the other thing is with the intermittent fasting, it's the calories that are eaten during the meal periods that are really important. And keeping up with those calories is very important. So when you're fasting, you've got to focus on getting enough calories, to compensate for potential weight loss. And later in the day, eating. So not eating all the way up before bed, because that might decrease your insulin sensitivity and encourage less weight loss, so that you might think that's good, but it also increases the risk of you having higher blood sugar and some problems with glucose and insulin regulation. So it's not recommended. Now, autophagy, that cleanup crew in your body, starts at about 18 to 20 hours. So a 24-hour fast might give you the most benefit without necessarily any weight loss. Okay, so every PALS has to determine, if they're going to try intermittent fasting, what level is working for them. And it won't be the same for everybody. So, okay, I've got to tell you that in the world of intermittent fasting, there's been a lot of research in intermittent fasting and neurodegeneration. And so I'm going to talk about preclinical or only animal models right now. And the benefits are shown in Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease, and multiple sclerosis. But in all the animal models, there's a decrease in ALS lifespan in the animal models. And the explanation for that is that the upper and lower motor neurons cannot adapt to the challenges of fasting energetically. They just don't respond. And that it's actually detrimental to skeletal muscle. Now, this is in mice, so just keep that in mind. We do not have any ALS human studies as of now. But I do feel that within our group, we are having human studies going on, N of one. Any one of you that is doing intermittent fasting is teaching the rest of us what the outcomes might be. So I think that, just like Tish said a year ago, we didn't know as much about mold and how important it was to evaluate that. I think a year from now, because of you pals, because you're the ones who are going to be trying this for yourself, some of you, you're collectively are going to be a human study. But anyway, in the animal models, a high-fat diet is protective, but fasting caused a lot of problems. So, but we are not the animals. We are not genetically designed rodents. So we really cannot just stay by an animal study. So thank you to those that are teaching us about moving beyond that and how that works. Now,
I wanted to let you know, Bill Brennan will be presenting probably in May what he's been doing. And there are a group of pals that are following him. So again, this is all important. And also, it's really important that you put your information in the registry, because then all pals worldwide will benefit. That's the purpose of that. Okay, continue.
Yeah, thanks, Tish, because I actually was, without saying names, referring to Bill and those pals that are doing this now. And so thank you. But we do know that a high-fat, low-carb diet does protect neurons and skeletal muscle preclinically. And we know clinically that it does that in other neurodegenerative diseases, just not quite in ALS yet, because ALS is always trailing behind the other neurodegenerative diseases in a lot of the research. So the high-fat, low-carb diet does help neuron survival, neuron function, increasing muscle mass and muscle metabolism. So this is really important. And this is why anyone knows that I'm always trying to bring fat into the diet for the pals. Now, why do the clinical studies fail? Because the ALS human studies that have really looked at high calorie, high fat diet, they are using that. So they're all tube feeding studies, of course, because it's really hard to do any dietary studies with free living people and measuring the food and all of that. So they only use tube feeding, which they can really calculate, precisely what a person's given and what they're taking in. So they all end up failing because they're using this kind of oil in very toxic commercial tube feeding formulas. And they're damaged oils, they're oxidized, they're chemically adulterated, they're GMO. So there's no surprise that the patients drop out of the study because they can't tolerate it. And I've read where there's an assumption made that the keto diet would fail for the same reason. So,
yeah, and by the way, nobody should be eating those oils.
Oh no, well, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, and Diana went through that in her presentation about the good fats and the damaging unhealthy fats. So yeah, that's what this is saying here. So I have some questions, and these are questions that I hope we can explore more in our clinicians group, and then through the pals. in the future, not too distant future, that we can get a better grip about ALS and intermittent fasting. I'm wondering if so when they look at intermittent fasting in ALS mice, that's a genetically pre-programmed model of a mouse, all right? So that's not a person. And so are there genetic dependent diet responses to intermittent fasting in both mice and humans? Are there aspects of your genetics, my genetics, and every pal's here genetics that would make us more or less diet responsive to intermittent fasting? You know, does the stage of ALS determine the efficacy of intermittent fasting? Does more lower motor neuron or upper motor neuron involvement determine that? And then within lower motor neuron involvement, are there subsets of motor neurons? It's not just upper and lower. That kind of makes it sound like there's only two motor neurons or two classifications, because within, for example, lower motor neurons, there's different classifications of motor neurons. Does it matter? Are there unique genetic differences and functional differences between motor neurons that will depend, that will determine, I mean, if intermittent fasting is going to be efficacious? And then we do know there should be a difference in men and women, because intermittent fasting can really negatively influence shifting progesterone levels in premenopausal and perimenopausal women. So it works best in postmenopausal women, but how best to manage intermittent fasting with women? Because there are more variables due to the hormones as opposed to men. And the reason it works best in postmenopausal women, because at that time, their hormonal variability is more like a man's. And from what I understand, that if a woman is menstruating or perimenopausal, it's better to do the intermittent fasting in the first half of the cycle, not in the second half when the progesterone is changing more. But these are questions. And I don't know how many of the pals that are doing intermittent fasting now of different styles are men or women, but we should be looking at differences between the two. And now, just to give you a moment, give you some space, meditation is intermittent fasting for the mind. Okay. Now, I'm just going to do a very brief here discussion of the keto diet. This is something that could come in more to part 2. There's a lot more to talk about, but there's 3 different or 4 different kind of categories of keto. And you don't have to lose weight on keto. I just want to let you know that, because when you read about keto and you read about intermittent fasting, 99.9% of the people that are looking into this are trying to lose weight. You are not trying to lose weight, or at least most of you. So don't get caught up in the literature that's all pointing towards weight loss. With sufficient calories, you can maintain your weight or even gain weight and follow a keto diet, and even with some intermittent fasting. But how much is going to be very individual. So the classic keto diet is what was developed for epilepsy. That is not what I recommend. The Mediterranean and diet, the modified Atkins diet is the MAD diet. That is pretty restrictive, especially in carbohydrate. Don't want to mess with your moods. And sometimes when the carbohydrate goes too low, that can be a problem. The medium chain triglyceride diet and the low glycemic index plan, those are probably where I think PALS should fall, somewhere between 45 to 70% fats. And then you can see the distribution between carbohydrates and proteins. But you always have to get enough calories. I've been very interested in using exogenous ketones, D-beta hydroxybutyrate, because when you use that, and it tastes pretty good, so this is not something, it's not like butyrate, it's different, that some of you may have had, and it can be pretty smelly and difficult, but this is basically pretty tasteless. And but when you use exogenous ketones, you're providing your body with a burst of ketones or a bolus of ketones. And that can help even loosen some of the restrictions of the ketogenic diet. And I do think it's important to allow some intermittent days of higher carbohydrate to replenish your muscle glycogen, your storage of carbohydrate. There's a link here to something called the Keto Mojo calculator, which some are using to measure your own ketone levels, because I can't tell you until you measure whether you're going to be in ketosis or not. So that you can look up later. And the optimal keto range would be maybe like about 1 to 3 for ALS. I'm thinking that's where I would try to keep somebody. And to gain weight on this diet, again, if you're using exogenous ketones, you can loosen up some of the restrictions on the keto diet. And that's a nice thing, but how much we have to figure out individually. But here are some of the foods. You've probably seen these lists before, looking into a keto diet or starches. You have root vegetables, which are so nutritious. And, some keto breads are out there, but you don't want to get going on a lot of processed keto products just because they say they're keto. So you really need to know what's in there. We've talked a lot in the past about the most nourishing fats and, the lower carb nuts, the lower carb seeds. And again, I know we could talk about lectins and which nuts and which seeds and so forth, but I'm just keeping these in categories now without going into all of that detail, because not all of it will apply to everybody. Very generous with non-starchy vegetables and fruits. I don't think I put fruits here. Oh yeah, low sugar fruits, eggs, and only organic animal protein. And then with tube feeding formulas, you can learn to customize tube feeding formulas. And so I typically work with customizing the Liquid Hope peptide. I haven't used the high protein Liquid Hope peptide yet. It's a newer product. And I have not been using the Liquid Hope keto, but I've been really thinking about, that's pretty extreme. The Liquid Hope keto is designed for epilepsy, and there are no nutrients in there really much besides fat and some protein. So it's really not a balanced diet for long. And so I would be, if someone wanted to try that, I would say you'd really have to add, pureed vegetables and fruits to that, or a juice or a powder to increase the carbs, especially to optimal levels. And I've been in the pals that I've worked with, I've added bulletproof brain octane to Liquid Hope peptide, and once with Liquid Hope high protein peptide, but I don't have as much experience with that formula to increase fats to optimal levels. And that's worked out pretty well. But if if you're sensitive to oxalates, you need to pick your vegetables wisely. And would just like to say, I think you should know whether you're sensitive to oxalates now. And if you've had an organic acid test through any of the companies like Genova, Great Plains, or Doctor's Data or others, look at the measurements of glycolic acid, glyceric acid, and oxalic acid, and see if those are indicating that you have a problem with oxalates. So one of the issues, ghrelin, it's the hunger hormone, and it is secreted from the stomach, and it increases your appetite. And we all have these hunger hormones, satiety hormones, but in ALS, I was really happy to see in the literature that they're looking at ghrelin, and they're looking at how this influences people's appetite, their hunger, their ability to eat, and how important that is. So when you have enough ghrelin, you will have a good appetite, you will gain weight. It is neuroprotective, it's muscle protective, it helps regulate your blood sugar. And so how do you increase ghrelin? It can be measured. I don't know anybody that's ever had their ghrelin measured, but it can be measured. But cannabis and THC might increase ghrelin. Healthy vagus nerve tone supports appetite, but zinc is really important. And zinc repletion, if you don't have enough zinc, zinc is really important to increase ghrelin. And once that happens, your smell of food, your hunger, your appetite, and the taste of food comes back. So we know that low serum zinc is present in about 50% of PALS, and that there's abnormal zinc homeostasis. So just knowing that is really important. So how are you going to assess that here? So you can look at your signs and symptoms. You know, are you feeling like where's my appetite? Where's my hunger? You know, food doesn't taste or smell the way it should. Do you not have enough stomach acid to digest it? Because zinc is really important for the maintaining of HCl. And do you have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, a really low thyroid? Poor immunity. Sometimes you'll see in more extreme cases, white spots on fingernails. And then there's the zinc taste test. It's an aqueous or a liquid zinc solution. And there's the instructions on how to do it I've included here. I'm not going to go through that now. It's not diagnostic, but it might be a helpful add-on way of diagnosing. Because if you are zinc replete, if you have enough zinc in your system, when you take in just a tiny bit of this little zinc liquid, it's going to taste terrible. You're going to want to spit it out. So, and then if you don't taste anything, it means that you need more zinc. But then when you go to the laboratory, it's not that hard to look at it in the lab. You could do a serum zinc or a red blood cell zinc. More often, serum zinc is what is available. A red blood cell zinc would become more of a specialized test, but I think you can learn a lot from both. And then the alkaline phosphatase, which is in your complete comprehensive metabolic panel. To look at zinc status, you would want to be at least between 70 and 90. And when you think, in the range, it says 35 is normal. So if you're low, if you're below 70, at least below 70, that really suggests that you do not have sufficient zinc status. And hair analysis can be useful also. So to stimulate your appetite, there are herbs and spices that can be appetite stimulating. So I've listed them here, and you might think about that, which ones you might want to use in cooking or as supplements. And saying take a breath of fresh air is meaningful because it has been found that getting some fresh air stimulates appetite. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Coco. Wow, that was great. You brought up so many good things. Thank you so much. And this is part one. We're going to be talking more in part two. But boy, what an very, very educational discussion. And so many of us miss these little pieces. Like I had sort of forgotten about zinc, interestingly enough, and ghrelin. Very fantastic. So thank you so much. We have a whole bunch of questions. So I think we get our moderators, Glenn and Heather. It would be great if you could start in with the questions.
Okay, so I'll stop the share.
Yep.
Okay.
No, that was wonderful. And guys, it's all pieces of the puzzle. And I love the fact that, you go to a nutritionist, they don't explain this thing. And I love the fact that you explained why, why it's important to, the intracellular fluids and the ATP, all that stuff. It's good. It's very important, each one of you, to understand why you're eating what you're eating and what the effects are. So thank you. Go ahead, Glenn and Heather.
All right.
All right.
Well, Glenn, you
Go
can start if
ahead.
you want.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
All right. So, Coco, is gluten-free, glyphosate-free organic oatmeal from Costco a good possible source of food for pals?
Well, the gluten-free, glyphosate-free, organic, and what other free was it?
Yep. Yeah, that was it. And it was oatmeal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
yes, as far as oatmeal being compared to oatmeal, it is a very high carbohydrate food. So even eaten by itself, it would not be a balanced food. If there was some oatmeal and then you put in, shredded coconut, you put in certain oils, like some MCT oil, and maybe certain nuts, you can change the composition of it. But I don't have my pals on oatmeal because I'm really trying to get that carbohydrate down, and oatmeal is such a high level. But you can turn it into something a little healthier by doing what I just said.
Okay, great. Next one is, do you agree that you should drink half your body weight in ounces for water?
Yeah, I almost put that there. It's a very general calculation. And yes, in general, yes. It depends where the water is going, Glenn. It's like, is the water going to the right places? Is it, if you're really swollen and you've got swollen feet and ankles, and if you're really inflamed and it's extracellular fluid that's too high, but still, yes, that's a good rule of thumb.
So if that's the case, then maybe you should drink as much water.
Drink what?
If that's the case with your feet swollen or thing, that you shouldn't drink as much water then?
Well, yes, you still should, but getting that swelling down is going to be really important. So, because you don't want to start dehydrating the rest of your body just because one area is imbalanced.
Gotcha.
And structured water can also help with the absorption of that water.
Mhm.
So there are many ways of structuring the water. You can check the 47 steps on water.
Yeah.
I talked about that.
Yes.
Okay, so Pennican has a couple of questions here. I'm going to do them one at a time. But do you agree that ALS and MND warriors should follow the gluten-free and dairy-free diet?
Absolutely.
Okay. And the second part of that is, why do ALS and MND warriors need to take supplements?
Okay, so that's a big question. Number one, our soil and the food that's grown in our soil is depleted, and even organic food. Now, all organic means is they're not adding pesticides and herbicides to the soil, but that doesn't tell you that the soil's healthy. I wish we didn't have to move towards supplements and we could use our whole foods that we buy at the grocery store, even organic. But so that's one reason. The other reason, in one of the slides where I showed how all the steps in metabolizing energy are dysfunctional, every one of those steps requires particular vitamins and minerals and nutrients to make them work. And every bit of detoxification, every stage of detoxification requires a long list of vitamins and minerals to make it work. PALs are depleted in so many of those nutrients due to poor digestion and poor assimilation. So, but it's not like a PALS has to take every supplement A to Z. They need to know what they need.
I know you talked about Kate Farms, but someone's asking the question, is Kate Farms standard 1.4 formula as nutritious as eating regular food?
No, it's not. If you're comparing like just eating Kate Farm standard to a mixed diet that you're choosing that is nutritious, there's no comparison. If you're using Kate Farms as a tube feeding and that's all you have, I would say that we've gone back and forth on this a lot, that the Liquid Hope made by Functional Formularies is a preferred formula to Kate Farms. And if a person can only get Kate Farms where they live, and that's the only one that is insurance covered, or depending upon what part of the world you live in, that might be the only one that's available, then I would adapt that with MCT oil or caprylic acid and try to balance it out.
So if we need to be drinking 8 or more cups of water a day, can that include other liquids like coconut milk? I had heard that liquids containing water is better than water alone.
So coconut milk is pretty rich in fat. And so coconut water is coconut water, coconut milk is coconut milk, and they're very, very different products. Coconut water is very high in natural sugar. So it has electrolytes in it, but I would not compare it to say, if you're going to drink 3 glasses of water, I would not drink 3 glasses of coconut water instead. I hope that answers
That'd be the same with coconut milk?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Coconut milk has far less water. It really has more fat than it does water.
Right. And I have an add-on to that because I drink Healing a Meal. Is the water that and I mix it with water, does that count towards my ounces of water a day?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
it does. And there is free water. Yes, any water that's added, and there's even free water in the formulas. So when you're really looking at someone's hydration status, if you want to look at, Kate Farms or Liquid Hope or any of those products, you can find in the analysis how much free water is in there, and you can count that as water.
Perfect. Thank you.
What about coffee and tea? Does that count?
Herbal tea counts as water. And in my, coffee can be dehydrating. So I don't, and you're not going to drink that much coffee. You wouldn't want to be drinking so much coffee to think that that's replenishing your hydration.
Yeah, because coffee is a diuretic, so it's almost like an anti-water, right?
Yes, yes. And same with tea that has caffeine in it.
Right. What are the best ways to eat in a vegan keto diet?
That is something I'd love to discuss in a follow-up thing. And that's where I said I'm just briefly touching on keto here. Keto does not have to include meat. And so then, but you have to get in enough protein. So the vegan also doesn't include eggs or anything. So the protein would have to come from vegetable sources. And that I would really want to look, how much, like I used to be on a vegan diet. Now I had to change that. I did not want to change it up here, but my body got really sick and I found out that my total protein level was low in my blood and my albumin level was low in my blood. And there was nothing I was doing that was raising it. I had to go back on some animal protein. That changed my values considerably. And so, but I don't feel that if veganism is your way of life, it's your diet, when I described way of life, then we have to make that work for you. Because it's
you can always substitute, add in some free-form amino acids if you want to remain vegan.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Cowden, because the free-form amino acids are going to be assimilated easier than any protein food that you would eat. And so that would be something like, for example, LEAP is amino acids for one product, and there's other things too. But yeah, Thank you.
Okay. Another question somebody has about heal in a mill. Is heal in a mill a helpful, I'm assuming, like food resource?
It is. I don't think that it is yet. There's a product out that's for tube feeding. So heal in a meal is very, very high in protein, and it's not that high in fat. So as a for pals, I would like that you would have to add fat to that, and it is fairly high in carbohydrate. So I think it's a wonderful food. It is all whole foods, and I have so much respect for that product, but I do think it would need to be individually figured out how to best balance with heal in a meal.
Right. So it's not a sole source, is what
No.
she's saying, sole source food. They are working on a sole source version of heal in a meal, but right now it is definitely it's great. And I take it. If I don't get enough vegetables a day, I take heal in a meal always. So, and a lot of people take one serving a day, which is great, but make sure you balance it with the extra fats that you're going to need, and then less carbohydrates the rest of the day. So just be aware of what it is. I agree, it's a great product, but definitely not a sole source product.
Here's what I have. This says I have a no sugar diet, but taking the new Relevrio ALS drug, but the taste is aggressive bitter, so I can only take it with a big coat of honey, like a tablespoon. So that breaks my glucose intake. What is your take on raw honey?
Well, is it you're taking it once a day, the Relivio? I never say it right. With a tablespoon of honey. I don't know. I think that person, depending upon everything else they're eating during the day, it might be okay. It is sugar. You know, honey is sugar, as well as maple syrup and so many other things. But I do know that the taste of that is really bad, and people are having a hard time with it. And I don't know how much it's helping people yet. Does anyone else know here? Okay.
One of the things that I do for really bad tasting things that you need to take by mouth that are liquid is to squeeze some fresh lemon into a glass, add pure water and some monk fruit liquid.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You make a lemonade and then you add that.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what else is good? Allulose. Allulose and monk fruit are both good to sweeten.
Yeah. If you could talk about some people have asked about juice. Could you tell us about people who drink juice? Maybe fruit juice is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so I do not advocate fruit juice. So like orange juice, apple juice, grape juice, or any of the fruit juice nectars, because they're very concentrated in sugar.
What about when someone's juicing, like taking the actual fruit?
Okay, so with juicing, if you're gonna make, so I really love juicing. Not everybody does. So you're going to get, I'll tell you, in the world of nutrition, you're going to get so many different takes on this. But in juicing, if you're going to use some juice, I would make it like 90% vegetable oriented and some apple to give it some sweetness. But you could also add a pinch of, fresh ginger root to give it a bit of a flavor. But not pure juice, because it's just like mainlining sugar.
Coco, this is Scott.
Yes.
What's your take on the stevia? I used to grow my own stevia when I lived in the Pacific Northwest. It just grew like weeds, and I used to give it to all my neighbors. What's your take on natural stevia?
I'm okay with natural stevia, organic stevia. I know it's been challenged tremendously at first by the sugar industry. They went to town against stevia. Stevia could have joined the market years earlier than it did, but there was a backlash against the fear of stevia entering the market. So it kind of has had to earn its reputation. I think it's going to be a flavor thing for a lot of people. Some people taste a certain bitterness in stevia and they know it's sweetened, and monk fruit can be better, I think. And then for baking or like, using sugar, when you want to use sugar, I think allulose is wonderful.
Okay, thanks.
Is the muscle turnover that you talked about, is it the same in PALS?
I think that muscle turnover in PALS is impaired. So muscle breaks down in PALS, but muscle isn't being regenerated in PALS. So we all have muscle turnover, all of us, all the time. And that's part of the process for PALS, is that how do you regenerate muscle that's breaking down? And that's where I think that simple, non-stressful resistance exercise is very helpful. And my PALS that Tish was telling you about in the very beginning, he had lost so much muscle and so much weight after coming out of COVID and then having to get ventilated and get on a feeding tube and everything. But he exercised every day. And I'm not saying everybody should do this, but he was on that recumbent cycle thing like a good 5 hours a day. And he loved it. It was his motorcycle. And he built so much muscle in a matter of, 6 months.
Yeah. Just to let you know, Craig, this patient is a 27-year ALS survivor. So that's a big deal, having ALS for 27 years. So just kind of want to pipe in there. He gained his muscle back. I mean, that's a long-term survivor, which is
I would have one more comment about regaining muscle. If you're paralyzed or nearly completely paralyzed, you can consider using electromagnetic stimulation devices on the muscles.
That works really well. Yes, the stem.
And we've had several pals use vibration machines, whole body vibration machines, because they're able to stand, but they can't walk, but they are able to stand. So if you can stand on a whole body vibration machine, that is actually building your muscle out throughout your body. Or sit on.
Yeah. If you can sit on it and have your caregiver put a belt around your upper chest and hold on to that so you don't topple over, you get benefit from that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Craig used to do that too. He had a machine and he would stand on it with the help of his Rifton. It would
Walker.
And vibrate them, and it worked well because then you also get the weight gain, which helps with the osteoporosis.
Right,
So,
his was called a turbosonic, but there's so many different vibration plates out there now.
Yeah, he had a sonic light.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, I was thinking food, and you brought in the other. Thank you.
A lot of people are saying that they're doing intermittent fasting, and Finnegan said if you're doing a study on intermittent fasting and ALS, he's in on it. I don't know if anybody else would be too.
I think we should have now that this is happening, I think we should have a formal way, our clinicians group, I would just suggest that we have a formal way of tracking this and doing measurements and getting what each person's individual fasting schedule is. Because I think we're learning as we go along with all these N of 1 experiments.
Yeah, we can add that to the registry. It's already, you have several options with the registry for intermittent fasting, but I will actually talk to Zach this week about getting very specific about the details of the type of intermittent fasting that each person is doing, so that when the clinicians do the analysis, they can see the exact intermittent schedule that each person is doing. So that's a great idea.
A lot of patients that have had their gallbladder removed or have otherwise very poor gallbladder function need to be taking, ox bile or tutka along with their meals if they're doing intermittent fasting, because otherwise they don't get enough calorie intake per day.
Good point. Everybody got that. Very important.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Cowden. So please, on your ALS registry, write down that you're doing intermittent fasting. I think we have 3 types of intermittent fasting. If your type of intermittent fasting is not listed, could you please send an email to healingals@gmail.com com, because we will be analyzing you, anyone who's doing intermittent fasting, and we're really cutting edge on this. You guys are all part of cutting edge research, because the clinician group will be looking at this, and ALS researchers will be looking at this. Next question.
My
We're
next,
a little
sorry.
late, so we should probably do, maybe more questions each. Do we have time to do that? Coco, can you do? more
Yes.
questions each?
Yeah.
Okay.
When determining diet / fasting for PALS, do you consider blood type?
I haven't. But that's a really good question. And I think that's something we could, I don't know. Didn't look into blood type in fasting. I looked into genetics in fasting. And I think I would add that to the list of questions that I put there that we still need to understand better.
Yeah, I mean, generally people with type O blood, for example, seem to need meat. They don't seem to do well on vegan diets. So that's a very blanket statement. In general,
But fasting is different. Fasting is a whole nother thing.
Exactly. Fasting,
what blood type, regardless of what you're eating, is there a blood type that's going to be more responsive to fasting than not?
Yeah, a very interesting question.
A few years ago, I looked very carefully into blood type and its effect on all kinds of physical health conditions, and found very little correlation.
Did you say you found very little?
Very
Yeah.
little.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood you right. It might be my internet, and it probably is. I'm having internet problems. So one question is, he was told by his neurologist that too much zinc can hurt upper motor neurons. What do you think of that?
Well, there is zinc, you can overdo it. So everything has to be in balance. So let's look at what that person's zinc status is, see if they even need any extra supplementation. And if a person does supplement with zinc, they need to be retested for that very reason.
Always give your zinc as a liquid, and when it starts tasting nasty, then stop.
That's right. And that is like when I was talking about the aqueous, the liquid solution for doing the zinc taste tally test. That's another way of kind of getting your individual. But the question I had there, Dr. Cowden or Diana or anyone who wants to chime in, is we all have different bitterness, sweet, salty, sour taste receptors on our tongue. And so 1/3 of us are extremely high sensitivity to taste, and 1/3 of us are not. And then so I kind of wonder with the variations in there, that's where the precise diagnosis with that test kind of loses itself. But you can find out for yourself and see along with the other tests.
I had a comment, Coco, about the zinc, is that one of the things we have in our body is the nutrients kind of categorize themselves into partners, and zinc is a very strong partner with copper. And there are some ALS patients that are very low copper. And so if they're taking zinc, they would actually lower the copper even more. So I think it really suggests that you really need to have an individualized assessment to know, like what Coco's saying, and to be able to monitor it. So RBC zinc and RBC copper are good ones. If you can only get serum copper and zinc in the blood tests, that's got some information for you. So it's zinc copper supplementation. You need to be careful, but I think Dr. Cowden's safety recommendation is just use your taste, and then most of the time that's going to be a good way to monitor if you need it or not.
Oh, thank you. I would add to that that when you do a serum copper, that you also get a measurement called ceruloplasmin, which is the copper carrying protein.
Yeah.
Because you can have high serum copper and it can look like you have adequate copper status, but you need to know how much of it is free copper versus protein bound copper to really know. So I think you can have like low copper status with high serum copper, because if it's not getting into your cells. So maybe the red blood cell copper would be better in that case. But anyway, there's it's more complicated, isn't it? But it can be figured
I'm
out.
so glad we have Dr. Weber, and we all learned how to muscle test.
I know.
I had a pal write me last week and said, you know, we just did a year and a half, almost 2 years of testing, and we just got the answers in 1 hour from Dr. Weber. Then we did almost 2 years of testing to come up with the exact same results. So do review the 2 weeks of muscle testing, and do practice your muscle testing.
Yeah.
Okay, how about one more question each, and then we'll end.
Okay. So if doing intermittent fasting, can you take all those supplements, herbs, minerals as LEAP formula in the non-eating window?
So that's a really good question. And we have, so taking LEAP would be easy because you're supposed to take that on an empty stomach anyway. Taking other supplements would be very difficult because most supplements you need food with them, or else it can really upset your stomach, or else they may not work as well. So that's but that's why if you're doing a intermittent fasting that is by the day, like a 24-hour period wouldn't necessarily matter, but how often you're doing it, like you're doing 24 hours once a week, once a month, you know, how often are you doing it? And then in the eating period during the day, if you're doing a 12-hour fast and then 9 hours of eating, you can get all your supplements in during that time.
Yeah, there's really no reason to take supplements during a fasting period.
No.
And I can't even take LEAP because it makes me hungry. So when I'm doing my intermittent fasting, whether it's 24 hours or 36 hours, I cannot take LEAP because it will actually stimulate my appetite.
And the whole point of fasting is to not stimulate your nervous system at all.
Exactly.
None of your neurotransmitters, none of your metabolism. It's to give it the silent treatment in a way. So
some people get in trouble if they don't do some minerals along with their fast.
in their water, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Minerals in their water, yes.
So you're suggesting
so
trace
you
minerals,
are-
trace mineral drops, or trace, I mean, I'd like some clarification.
Yeah. Fulvic minerals added to the water, or deep ocean trace minerals, or sometimes some people need extra magnesium as well, above and beyond what they get. The deep ocean trace minerals has a lot of magnesium in it, so that's one way to get it.
And
Thanks.
if you are on, thank you, Dr. Cowden, for bringing that up, because if you are on reverse osmosis water, you absolutely need minerals during the fast.
Absolutely.
Or you need it fasting or not fasting, you need those minerals.
Right, you need them not fasting or non-fasting. So don't
Yeah.
even think about not having your minerals if you have reverse osmosis water. That should be every day.
I see one question here. I just want to say it's such a quick question. Is coconut oil good or bad? Good.
Good. Yeah,
Okay.
good.
Good.
I-
Dr.
I-
Newport,
I have a practical comment. Early in the presentation, Coco talked about people that have ALS not wanting to, bother their caregiver to go to the toilet, and so then they start retaining fluids and building up edema and stuff like that. If you're paralyzed, and you can't get out of bed, and you need somebody to help you to the toilet for urination. There's external catheters for men and for women. So do consider that, and in that way the person's not holding their urine longer than they need to.
what a great suggestion. That's absolutely true, guys. We all have to be a little more open about this, but the reality is that is a very good solution, both for men and women. So you don't feel you have to, you're bothering people, and it's a lot less energy as well. So
Yeah.
you have alternatives. Great. And also coconut oil. Dr. Mary Newport actually gave her husband, who had Alzheimer's disease, 12 tablespoons of between a combination of coconut oil and MCT oil. Butch Macklin, who is one of the ALS reversals, he was taking 9 tablespoons a day of coconut oil. He took out 3 for breakfast, 3 for lunch, 3 for dinner. And every time he tried to reduce that amount, his symptoms would come back. But he reduced fasciculations, he reduced, I mean, he was doing very, very well on that on a combination of magnesium flakes solution. But between those two things, every time he tried to reduce them, it would come back. So again, he experimented with the amount that his body needed. And his mother passed away of ALS, and he started doing exactly the same. People ask about genetics. He had a genetic form of ALS, and he reversed. And the reality is, he followed the same pattern as his mom for the first 2 years, then started doing the coconut oil and the magnesium, and he reversed, whereas his mom passed away after 4 years, and he reversed the symptoms as was walking and talking and doing very well.
Aw.
Yeah, it's important to know that about 60 to 70% of the coconut oil is MCT oil, and MCT oil has very powerful antiviral properties. And so if a lot of the problem with the nervous system is coming from inflammation, the MCT oil that's in the coconut oil will significantly improve that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you
Yes.
so much. We will get to the rest of the questions. Please come again in a month. We will be doing more. And
Yeah, let's save the questions, right? Save the questions that didn't get answered today, maybe, and then try to address.
maybe what we can do, Coco, on those questions that didn't get answered, I will let you respond to them by email, and then we will have Jim add them to the notes
Okay,
for the questions that did not get answered. That would be great.
okay.
Thank you. I created 2, well, Scott's doing the goodbyes, and just Dr. Cowden and Coco, thank you so much, and Diana and Heather and Glenn, thank you so much for moderating. Really appreciate it. And so what I'm gonna open up the breakout rooms while Scott is saying goodbyes. And I have 2 breakout rooms. One is called ALS physical protocols, and the other is called mental and emotional protocols. So if you want to talk about the mind, healing the mind and ALS, then go to the one. And if you really want to know more about healing the body, then go to the other. So the breakout rooms are now open. And Scott, I will let you take over from here.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for being here. It's wonderful to see Kim and Kay here joining us. It's fantastic. It's wonderful to see Pinnakin is involved and Constant. He is expanding on his Healing MND India. I love seeing Lisa Manchester here. It's fantastic. I love seeing all of you.
And Dr. Joyce was here.
And Dr. Joyce, yes, fantastic for tuning in. Thank you for all of your
I can
enthusiasm
hear,
and
I just
excitement.
couldn't comment. Love you all. Miracles and prayers and everything to everybody till next time.
That's right. Yes. And we will keep that going. Thank you so much, moderators, Glenn and Heather. Thank you, Dr. Cowden, for tuning in. Thank you so much, Coco, for a wonderful presentation and the detail. I would like to see us continue this, like in part 2 or something later on. This is fantastic, Coco. Great information. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. We love you all. Please stay involved. Be a part of the 47 steps. There's lots of detail in there that everyone thinks, well, I've done everything, but then you go over those 47 steps and there's things that you may have missed along the way. So bye-bye. Bye, Don. Thanks for being here,
And
Don.
join us on Saturday.
Doing great.
Look up the numbers.
Yes, the prayer
Saturday.
group on Saturdays. Yes, with Dr. Joyce Brown. That's fantastic. See you, William. You hold up
Pacific
the
time.
form there, William. That's fantastic. Oh, the whole Brennan family. That's great. That all of that, doing that bit and muscle testing. I do want to explain that if you want to join and continue these conversations in the breakout rooms, go to the bottom right corner of your screen. Click on breakout rooms. You'll see 2, one for ALS physical protocols and one for ALS mental and emotional protocols. You can join whatever breakout room you want by clicking on the blue button, join. If you're having a problem trying to get into a breakout room, we can try to assist you to help you get into the breakout rooms, okay? So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Tondalea and Jonathan and Dorothea. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Diana, for tuning in and giving us a little bit of everything and your knowledge and wisdom that you have. with all the dietary concerns that we have, it all comes together with the diet, the physical, all of the protocols that you're doing, the supplement involvement, all of that. And very good point that Diana put out between the zinc and copper. That's so huge. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carl, for being here. Thanks a lot, Ryan. Bye-bye. Bye, Valentina. Bye-bye, Victorian. Thank you so much. Thank you, Susie. Thanks, Pinnakin. All you do up there in India is amazing. Keep that growing. Love you, Pinnakin. Thank you, Teresa, for being here. Bye-bye.